Did you know that Djibouti was once called French Somaliland? Anyways, here are the Somalias of Africa. Like, subscribe and share please to help us. Thanks and enjoy. We have covered the 3 Guineas, the 2 Congos, and yet to cover the 2 Sudans. However, covering the 2 Somalias is a unique topic because of the complicated history and current issues the 2 entities face today. This whole country is called Somalia, while this northern region calls itself Somaliland and claims to be its own sovereign country. However, they are an unrecognized nation. How did this happen? Let's take a look. The whole region has been occupied since as early as the 4th millennium. And as time progressed, the people of the area were introduced to the Arabs, the Greeks, and eventually the Romans, as it has always had a significant location for trading. It was even occupied by the Ottoman Empire in the 1500s. Somaliland was eventually occupied by England in 1884, after years of war, with treaties signed between British leaders and major Somaliland clans. The English mainly resided on the coasts to supply items across the waters. However, they would clash for over 20 years against the dervishes. Meanwhile, in 1889, Somali leaders signed treaties with Italy to become a protectorate of the European nation. Italy would come to lose control of Somalia after World War II, therefore leaving the nation to be controlled by England. But in 1950, Somalia was given back to Italy on the grounds of helping Somalia to eventually become an independent nation. As the cries of independence dominated the continent in the Year of Africa, a video you can watch if you click on the top right portion of this video, England granted the state of Somaliland independence as long as it unified with the Trust Territory of Somalia. Therefore, on the 26th of June 1960, it became the state of Somaliland, and 5 days later, it voluntarily united with the Trust Territory of Somalia to become the Somali Republic. As the Northerners were actually enthusiastic about the union, it quickly turned sour as a referendum presented by the unified nation did not favor them, and it was ultimately rejected. However, they could not tweak it as they were the minorities. This even led to a failed short-lived uprising the year later, as some soldiers took control of Hargeisa, demanding a separation from the Somali Republic. Then in 1969, the president of Somalia was assassinated by his own bodyguard, and military rule took over literally the day after the president's funeral, led by Major General Mohammed Siad Barre, who can be credited for the state of Somalia today. He initially tried to promote a greater Somalia by increasing the literacy rate and nationalizing land, but he eventually initiated a war with Ethiopia, trying to annex the Somali region into Somalia, with the intention of eventually annexing the greater Somalia region, a concept we'll cover later in the video. This attempt though failed miserably, as the Somali allies like the Soviets and Cuba turned against Somalia, and by 1978, Barre was driven back into Somalia. This began the negative sentiment towards Barre, as the war crippled Somalia so much that they had to depend on foreign aid, while the northern part of Somalia gained almost 2 million refugees overnight, adding stress to the country's already fragile infrastructure. The foreign aid was unfairly distributed to the refugees as opposed to the locals of the north. Hence, the north began to oppose Barre's policies. Then, an attempted coup later in the year pushed Barre's regime to arrest and execute anyone he thought conspired to remove him from power. Some of the people escaped and created the Somali National Movement in 1981, thus leading a rebellion against Barre's regime. At the height of the rebellion, Barre almost completely leveled Hargeisa, killing about 200,000 people. Eventually, with support from Ethiopia and more rebel groups standing up to Barre, his regime collapsed and Barre fled in a tank with reserves worth about $27 million to Kenya. The Kenyans did not want him, so he fled to Nigeria, where he died of a heart attack 5 years later. At the end of the Somali rebellion leading into the Somali civil war, there was a void in power, and the north of Somalia used this opportunity to declare independence, calling themselves the Republic of Somaliland on May 18, 1991. Today, Somaliland is a fully functioning state, complete with its own passport, military, president, and currency. To visit the country, you will need a Somaliland visa, while a Somalia visa will be rejected. It has held its own elections, built its infrastructure that works, and has very few diplomatic ties with some nations. It is also the largest unrecognized country on earth in terms of size, with a population of 5.7 million people. Its GDP of $7 billion comes from livestock and remittances from the diaspora. The official language is Somali, and the popular religion in the country is Islam. They separate themselves from Somalia by calling themselves Somalilanders. Here is the problem. Somaliland is not recognized by the UN and the AU due to the fear of other regions seeking autonomy. This has resulted in the unrecognized nation not being able to acquire aid or trading relations with many nations, keeping it from improving itself, even though the UAE will be spending some money on the port of Somaliland in the future. The AU wants to maintain colonial boundaries and keep Somali's territorial integrity. Somalia is looking for a unified federal state, dealing with ongoing political and security challenges, such as the fight against terrorism and efforts to stabilize the country. Hence, it has put the priority of a Somaliland secession movement lower in its hierarchy of issues to resolve. Somaliland has ties with Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, UAE, Turkey, and remains part of the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. Somalia, however, is 637,000 square kilometers with a population of over 12 million people, mainly consisting of Somalis. The major religion of the nation is Sunni Islam, and its GDP of over $20 billion depends on gold, exports, and livestock. It is literally the Horn of Africa, which gives it the distinction of having the longest coastline on the continent. The official language is Somali, and they also call themselves Somalis. Unfortunately, Somalia is one of the least developed countries on earth in terms of poverty, human resources, and economic vulnerability, which is sad because the area boasts a rich history while being in a significant geopolitical location in the Horn of Africa. As mentioned earlier, Barre's regime single-handedly has kept Somalia busy in its own turmoil to solve, as they have to build a stable government, repel terrorist threats, and suppress a complex piracy on its coasts. As mentioned earlier, historically, many Somalis have lived outside the border of Somalia. Hence, there is a Somali region in Ethiopia with ethnic Somalis already living there. Then there is even Greater Somalia, which encompasses the portions of Ethiopia, Djibouti, and even Kenya. Though they share an identical lineage, there is a bit of tension in uniting the region, due to, of course, some of the Somalis living in Ethiopia, the history of the Ogaden War, and Somalia even getting involved in the Shifter War, a conflict in which Somalis in northern Kenya wanted to be annexed into Somalia. As Somalia looks to maintain its territorial integrity and achieve political stability through the establishment of a unified federal state, Somaliland, on the other hand, seeks international recognition as an independent country and aims to secure its sovereignty. As the relationship between these two countries continues to be complex, one can only hope for a timely resolution. Thanks for watching. Will we see you in the next one?